Hi folks, welcome to EA Unplugged. I'm Freeman, Battlefield's community manager, and joining me around the table, we've got some of EA's top creative minds from some of our action and shooter studios, as well as members of our Game Changer program. We're going to be talking about our action shooter games today, talking about how they get made. Let's introduce everyone. So let's start with Drew.
I'm Drew McCoy. I'm executive producer on Apex Legends at Respawn, and I've been with the studio since the beginning.
I'm Adam, one half of TwoAngryGamers, Twitch streamers for about 5 or 6 years, and I've been with the Game Changers since Battlefield Hardline.
I'm MoonLiteWolf. I go by MoonLiteWolf. I'm a mixer streamer, and I play a lot of FPS games. I do Anthem, I do Apex, I do all of that. And I'm a sound engineer full-time.
Okay, to my left.
I'm Ben Irving. I'm the lead producer for Anthem. I've been at BioWare for about 8 years now.
Lars Gustavsson, currently producer on Battlefield in Stockholm, DICE, Sweden. Have been with the franchise since the very first prototype in '99. It's really my life in a nutshell.
Making games is hard. Like, how do you start? What is that spark that you get in that creative process?
At Respawn, it's actually a really iterative, prototypey process. We're very design-driven. Every designer would take a week at a time and try and make something. It could be anything. It could be a weapon. It could be a level idea. It could be an AI. It could be an encounter. Anything. And we made hundreds of these things, played them, rated them, and came up with ones we thought were really cool, and that eventually turned into the Titanfall 2 single player. And then Apex was born out of a prototype that two guys did, and then more people were like, that's really cool, and we were playing it every day, and it was getting better and better, and we're like, okay, now this is the game we're making. And it's not a repeatable process. Every game is its own wonderful mess.
So basically, you start with freeform prototyping and see what goal is to be found.
Yeah.
And then you shape a game around it, rather than start with, here's a great idea, let's see what we can do.
It depends on where the process is. So if we knew we were making Titanfall 2, we knew we wanted single player. We had done some bigger prototypes that had spanned like multiple people, weeks, months, whatever. And those ended up feeling like not a great use of our time. So we kind of reset and said, okay, we need to find a lot of cool stuff really fast. Whereas the one for Apex was more of a, hey guys, we worked really hard on Titanfall 2, we worked really hard on the post-launch support, go have fun and find whatever you want. And there was some crazy, crazy, crazy stuff made. But Apex is the one that ultimately stuck.
Like, in that process, does it leave like a lot just like on the floor that doesn't ever come to light?
Yeah, certainly for Anthem that's true. I mean, I think, you know, there's lots of great ideas out there, and I think part of the challenge is the execution of it, right? And I'm sure everyone works on kind of big teams, and one challenge we have a lot is, you know, you have this great idea, and then it's like, how do you get, say, hundreds of people to like deeply understand that same thing? So when they're all making their decisions every day, how are they always making the decisions that support that vision and that idea that you have? I don't think anyone's ever shipped a game and said, we did every single thing we wanted to do in this game. Like, it doesn't happen. So you leave things on the table with this hope that one day you get to bring them back into the game.
With regards to live service, how different is it now compared to 10 years ago?
There's a cost that comes with shipping. No matter how small, you could ship a one-line change to fix a bug. That still has to go through an entire process of making a build, getting it tested by your internal testers, handing it off to, you know, certification, all these other things. Like what could seem like, oh, that'll take like an hour, right? Ends up taking like 2.5 weeks.
Sometimes you wish that, okay, I've done the fix, submit. Users have it, but we're not there yet.
The standard's higher as well, I think, than 10 years ago. You know, I remember playing games 10 years ago, and after a patch, things didn't work, and it was just part of life. The servers were down. Like, it's not tolerated anymore, and that's kind of good. Like, because of that, we do have more checks and balances. It takes more time to do certain things, and it's hard to explain that context because it can feel like excuses, and like we just want to make a better game as well, and so.
So we just shipped a patch this week on Tuesday. And then Monday night, we found that the way we had added localized dialogue to the game triggered some form within one of the first parties during CERT. And so it put us at risk of shipping on Tuesday morning. And so we had to go out and put a little, you know, note to the community saying, hey, we know that you guys are expecting it. We didn't say what time today, but it's later than we wanted to and you were expecting. So we've had some last minute issues. Bear with us. Ended up shipping it, you know, 4 or 5 hours later. And some of the community was like, this is ridiculous, unacceptable. I'm like, you don't want to throw a first party under the bus.
Right.
You know, we should have caught it in testing perhaps. Like there's all these things that, so you don't want to be doing that.
You can't give that context often, right?
Yeah, that gave rise to a conversation internally where I was talking with our community manager, Jay, about how do we talk about this? And so we put up a post, like here's the bugs that you guys have found. This is our response to it. Yes, we think this is a bug, we're fixing it. No, that's intended. Like we go line by line almost through things people are talking about. We're trying to build a live stream studio at Respawn so that we can sit down and like load up a build a game and load a test map and show off skins or things. Like we want to find ways to kind of close that gap a little bit and not try and have to make everything so ultra polished, you know, AAA. Like, no, we're just a bunch of people working in an office. Here's the stuff we're making. We think it's cool. Do you think it's cool? Like, help us kind of guide it along the way and try and make that relationship more real.
I was talking to some people at Apex. They told me it can take up to a year to create a character.
More. We've never made a character in under 14 months.
That blew my mind, and I guaranteed like a majority of the Apex community does not.
No, it's usually a year and a half to make a legend.
Yeah, like after playing a week, people are like, "Cool. So when's the new map? When's the new character? Like, when am I getting?"
King's Canyon took us about 14, 16 months. Each character is 14, 16, 18 months.
This is all great information. They just don't have that knowledge.
Your earlier question about how has live service changed things? The first 8 characters, we did them all simultaneously. So they could like rise and fall in progress along the way, knowing they all got to hit this date. Now we're like, we got to have a character hit a date constantly, every few weeks. And balance it.
You have classes, so you have to worry about balancing.
Playtesting time is a huge pain. Like we spend 3 hours plus a day playtesting, and we can't playtest enough. We can't get enough testers in our matches.
3 hours.
And that's where we balance, that's where we tune, that's where we decide what's really good and get more resources to that. Oh, that's not working, put it on the back burner. But then now we have, what, 4 or 5 hours a day to actually create stuff? And like there's this constant push and pull of time and not doing stuff in batches, trying to kind of pipeline things. So we have a bunch of characters all hitting different milestones every month type of stuff. And that's a learning process for us, and it's been difficult.
It's interesting, like 14 months Kings Canyon. We're at about, what, 9 months for a Battlefield map on average?
Depends on, I mean, especially when you go to a new biome. You want to see what are the leaps we want to take this time around. And as everyone else, you definitely know, you will fail, you will take steps back. And we have levels. I was talking about one from Battlefield 3. It was called Omaha Desert. We played it for ages. And it's almost there, but never got there. So it's kind of, okay, we have to pull it. I think we did the maps for Battlefield 1. How's your French? Nivelle Nights and Prédatrice.
Prédatrice. I think he said tirailleurs.
Those, I think, the team did in 2-3 months. Extremely talented team, but they had all kind of
They had the assets.
They had the assets, and basically take whatever shortcuts you want. And I think they delivered super cool maps. Yeah. So it's all kind of how much are we pushing new boundaries versus how do we just allow ourselves to be creative.
Yeah, and that's 2 like multiplayer arenas on this side of the table. But then Anthem, this is a world. I mean, how many iterations do you go through to get the world?
I mean, the world took a long time for Anthem. We wanted to add flight to the game. Like, flight's a really important part of Anthem and the heavy traversal. But like, it seems like a lot of games don't do flight because it's a pain to work out. Like, what about quest structure? What about like level design, and how do you, our lead level designer phrased it as creating a Swiss cheese, was kind of the map of like, how do you reuse all these things, and then how do you not get upset when someone just flies over it real fast? And so creating, but they were really smart about it. The team, you know, they would just create like quests that this quest loops around here and you fly over this, but the next quest takes you to the midpoint. And because you flew over it, like it doesn't feel that familiar when you come back to do the objective in the end. So that took a lot of time, and the payoff was really meant to be, hey, but flight feels so worth it. Like, can we work this out? Honestly, we haven't really solved it for the world itself. Like, we're adding lots of new content, but we're doing lots of instant stuff. So like strongholds, like our dungeons, you know, or the Cataclysm is something we have on PTS now that we're playing. But at some point we want to extend that world, and we've spent a lot of time talking about, well, we want to do a new biome, and we're going to go do more photogrammetry. Like, we've set this high standard of quality of the art in our game, which a lot of it actually we worked with DICE in Sweden to help us out with that about 2 years ago, probably. As kind of the experts on using Frostbite to make it look amazing, which was great, you know. And then you have to layer in, well, for a game like ours, like progression systems are a big part of it. And I think, you know, we're pretty honest with ourselves. Like, our progression systems aren't as good as we wanted them to be. And I think if you can nail that, though, and the game's more replayable, then you can reuse the same environment. Like Apex, it's great. It's a PvP-centric game. Like map mastery, same with Battlefield. Map mastery is a huge part of that. And so I think you get the benefit of probably not having to ship things as frequently as, say, a PvE-centric game. And so how do you run that content treadmill and incentivize with rewards and make things replayable and systemically replayable, and it kind of just becomes this big puzzle to solve. And all the way back to the question of like, how do you provide insight to that? That's what I struggle with the most to share with players is like, it's like the sum of 1,000 decisions. And so like, how do you explain the 1,000? Like, I don't even really remember some of them. It's just, you just know that all these things happen and that's why we made a certain decision. And I don't know, that's complicated, I guess.
And if you don't get it right, then it becomes a content consumption as opposed to like for a game like Anthem where, yeah, if you just do it all once, like, there's no way, physical way to keep up content-wise. That's why systems that make reuse usable is so important for that type of game.
It's also interesting how the world have changed where, old days, box products, and we had an expansion later on, but it was still kind of a big gap in between. But now you're starting to think much more about kind of what beasts you have created, where you kind of started to build a game, and whether it's extra animation or extra, we always try to make it as immersive and kind of getting the feel for it as possible. But it also means that if we're going to do more of it, it's going to be so much more kind of expensive. So it's almost at times you missed the good old days with 1942, where you had a list of vehicles and 2,400 polygons for an airplane. You'd kick it together in a week and off it goes. But now it's just hearing what it takes to do a character. So it's sometimes you can miss those old days where it was just easy. You could pump out content and try things.
Yeah, there was a bunch of consternation early on in Apex because we wanted the ping system to be fully voiced by all the characters. And that's a ton of dialogue. Yeah. Like when localization got
like is so good that you guys made.
Yes. Well, I think that's now set a new standard.
Yeah, but that was a lot. That was like over 1,000 lines of dialogue per character.
And if you had a new gun or a new thing,
there's the problem. And that's why every piece of content, or like we want to add, like let's say the jump towers, the balloons. Let's say those weren't in the game at launch, and then we modeled it in a week because it's just a balloon, and hooked up the script and code. Took another 2 weeks, whatever. It's done in a month. Oh no, now you got to be able to ping it. So now we got to get all those actors back into the booth. We got to write probably 30 lines per character and then have them do 2 or 3 takes that we like per line. And it's like, that made the ping system ultimately as good as it was, but that was a conscious decision we had to make of like, anything we add to the game now has this giant burden, this tax on top of it just for VO. And that's, if you make those decisions without thinking through that, you paint yourself in a corner so incredibly fast, you're like, we can't ship anything. At some point, you got to just trust the intuition of your team if it's experienced to help you through that kind of stuff. But it's just, content's crazy.
I remember with 1942, where we showed it at E3 before we launched, and it was kind of, people went crazy and super cool. But Patrick Söderlund and Johan came back and said, it doesn't look good enough. And we kind of, but it's 64 players. We can't make it as good looking as Allied Assault. It was kind of, there's no way. But it's kind of, no, players won't care. They won't care that you have 64 players. They want it to look equally good or better. And so we worked hard during the summer. I'm not sure if we reached it, but we definitely did our best. So there's so many factors to kind of bring into it in how you work.
And then, as you said earlier, you've got other companies raising that bar whilst you're working.
So E3 is just as exciting for us as everyone else out there, because we're like, how in the world did they do that? Oh, God.
So the short version then. Video games are hard, but we love doing it, right?
Absolutely.
We love doing it.
You have to be passionate, though. Like, I don't know how you would survive doing it if you weren't passionate. Like, there's so much tough stuff between all the creative friction and the timeline budget, whatever. And so I think passion has to be everything. Otherwise, I just why would you do something easier that probably pays more money? Like, there's just no need to do this if it's not what you live and breathe.
There's none. Well, everyone, thank you for this chat. This is magnificent. And thank you to everyone for watching. Thanks for watching EA Unplugged.